All right. Happy Cinco de Mayo Day. Happy Wednesday. And good afternoon, everyone. I am super pumped to have my guest today. She is a award-winning author of Zero to Podcast, the host of Culture Factor 2.0, and a great influencer on Clubhouse that really is giving back to the podcast community and how to grow a podcast and everything in between. So I am super pumped. Thank you so much. Holly Shannon, welcome to the Living a Purposeful Lifestyle show today.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, how are you? And hi, everybody. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I wore my fun earrings for today. I figured everybody would be, festive.
Yeah, I actually had lunch and had the tacos and the nachos for Cinco de Mayo, and later hopefully we'll have a chance to have one of those margaritas that you talked about. So let's get into it. So you are quite the influencer, quite the expert into this podcast, and I've gotten to know you primarily through, I think our relationship really kind of started on Clubhouse, and I was just blown away by your giving nature and your ability to share information. I'm just curious, when you started Culture Factor, was that the first podcast that you did?
Yes, it was. First time. Right. So first time behind a mic. I'd always been in the marketing space, like throughout my career. So it was a departure, but I had always been in sales. Look at me. See, I use my hands when I talk. Like I've just always been in that mode in front of people. I used to do very high level, like, board level C-suite retreats. So I was always in front of a unique specialized audience like that. So getting into podcasting was a different medium, but some of the skills that I had before came with.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that's awesome. And, I guess, as I think about what you're doing, like what led you to think that you were going to do this podcast? I mean, what really lit your fire that's what you wanted to do?
You know what, Jason, I'm going to be really honest. I didn't see the train coming. Like I never really thought about podcasting until I was working with a startup, and the concept behind it was to use it as a pull marketing tool to bring leads to the website. So it was strictly created under the guise of creating business. It wasn't like, oh, I want to pick up a microphone and I want to interview people, or that I had a specific message, which are usually the two reasons people get into podcasting. So I will say it was highly accidental, and then I really liked it. I loved being able to dive into people's stories, see how they're affecting the business world, whether it's, startup culture, VC culture, company culture, whatever it has to be, and just found that I really loved it. We met in Clubhouse, and what I've done is I've taken my passion for podcasting into the Clubhouse rooms because I want more voices out there. Like I think it's so great. I think to have a medium that is democratized, that anybody who wants to share their ideas, their voice, their vision, their expertise, their lack of expertise, maybe they're just curious and want to interview people, like, it's such a great medium. So can you tell that I love it?
I do. And, your passion comes through anytime that I've had any interaction with you or whatever. You can tell that. And it's so weird. I tell people it's funny in my line of business and convenience, I really have this passion about it. I developed it and it was very unexpected. And so what's weird is that when I found it, I didn't anticipate it. And then as time went by, I was told by people that you either fall into it or you're born into it, because nobody, when they graduate high school, goes, hey, I'm going to be a director or a vice president of operations at a convenience store chain. And so I see the similarities there. And, I think I'm on episode 18, 19, and I have found that this weekly show that I do, I really look forward to it. It's probably one of the funnest things I get to do every week because I get to meet cool, interesting people and really learn about people's backstory. And that's what this is all about. And I think as we learn about people, then we are able to be enlightened. And a lot of times we can see ourselves in them. And sometimes that can be very motivational.
Oh, without a doubt. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, like, going back to your childhood and all that, were you kind of did you enjoy speaking, and were you kind of that person that liked to voice your opinions and outspoken? Were you always that way, or is that something that's come later in life?
I would say that I'm more of an extrovert and I feed off of the energy of people. I did enjoy a really good debate when I was younger. I was, a business student always, like in high school, I was in the DECA club, and in college, I was in international business, and I really enjoyed the debates. I enjoyed in school when I took public speaking. I actually really enjoyed that as well. I just never saw myself behind a mic. It was kind of interesting that I ended up here. I'm not sure that I thought I really had anything to say that required a mic. I mean, I definitely was okay with sharing my opinion and being strong when I felt like I needed to say something. But I guess I never saw myself behind a mic. But I will say that the interesting thing is, Jason, that I have learned that it's actually not having a lot to say. It's actually learning to listen. And I have spent the last year working on that skill because I don't think that it comes naturally to most people. I think we always, and I don't mean it in a negative way, I just think we all have a story going in our head when someone starts to speak where maybe we want to interject or be a part of the conversation. So we stop at some point listening to the thread of what they're saying because we're still in that story. So I have spent the better part of this year working on my active listening skills and trying to get better with every interview. I mean, I go back and I listen to my work to try and progress and get better. I think, I'm a perpetual student. So like, I feel like I have more to learn all the time.
Wow. Well, and I think that hunger to learn definitely serves you well. And it comes across when you're leading those clubhouses that I've been part of. There's been several times where you've been very open and candid on there about things that you're even dealing with your own personal journey. And I respect someone that says, hey, I don't have to have it all figured out. And we're all day to day figuring it out. Some of us may be further in our journey than others, but we're all trying to figure it out, right?
Absolutely. Jason, it's so true. You actually were in the room when I unpacked some stuff. And, I think that's why I'm so in love with audio first technology. It's why I think I love podcasting and why I love Clubhouse. And I'm not saying that I don't love LinkedIn, but these opportunities to speak live where people really get to know you are rare, like I got on your show, and I appreciate that opportunity. But most of the time we're posting long form content, a little video here and there, pictures. It's really hard to get a sense. I mean, you get a feel for a person's personality, but I love to have conversation. Like I love to listen. There's a lot to be said about intonation and tone, and you cannot get that in a post ever. It doesn't matter how authentic and how honest and vulnerable you try to be on your post, how many emojis you put in there, lack of hashtags, exclamations, or caps. Nothing is like the human voice. And it's what came to us first as natural beings, not writing.
Yeah, I've never thought about that before as far as learning to talk or to babbling to speak, quite honestly, is probably outside of eating is the next thing that we learn to do, right? Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting perspective. I love how you kind of preface that with LinkedIn. You talked about, it's great for the things that it does, but there's no substitute for the back and forth, right? The interactions that happen. And I mean, there have been some tremendous discussion points that I've been part of that probably would have never happened on any other platform or any other in any other setting, because when you're there, you have so actively chosen to be part of that discussion, and so it's important to you. So I think that's it's very well said, and I agree with you from a point of view of those interactions. I would say I think the interactions and the relationship building goes deeper faster than what it does perhaps just on LinkedIn. And what I'm finding is if you can find a way to marry the groups together and to do some of each, there's benefits for each, and you get the biggest bang for your buck. But it's also requires the commitment and the time to do that.
Yeah. Well, when you look at it from the vantage point of personal branding and how you use all the different mediums, you definitely have to choose what works best for your life. I personally think podcasting is like the easiest tool. I'm not going to do any big sell, but it's just, to me, to capture that conversation that's so real and then be able to repurpose the whole thing or pieces and parts of it in audiograms or transcripts as your blog. It gives you so much versatility, and I'm sure the LinkedIn Lives is the same thing. Like, I mean, eventually, Jason, you and I have even talked about it, whether it's with me, without me, or you decide not to do it, but repurposing your content that you're doing here, where you're having these really meaningful conversations and putting it into audio format, I think is really worthwhile. I mean, because I look at it like LinkedIn Live is great, but the people who show up to this conversation today are people who follow you and follow me, whereas podcasting has global reach. So it's immediately in iTunes and it's in Spotify and iHeartRadio. So if anybody is Googling, living a purposeful lifestyle, or any of those three words, living purposeful lifestyle, they find your podcast. It's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I'm all in on doing that. I've got a few things I got to get ironed out first before I do that, because I want to be able to when I do this, I want it to be done right.
Of course.
It's funny because when I started, I think I shared with you, when I started the LinkedIn Live journey, it was kind of surprising and very fast in how it went, and I just got off to a start like anyone else. Will tell you sometimes the best thing to do is just start, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you did that, actually. That's good.
And so I just started, and what I've learned along the way, and I feel like each interview gets a little better. And part of it is, to your point, it is that listening and kind of just letting the conversation evolve and go where it is. I think early on, maybe I went in it too structured, thinking I wanted to go here, I wanted to go there. And what I did by doing that was maybe cut off conversations that would have been more valuable looking back on it. So I loved how you said earlier that you re-listen to your own shows and that you critique them and then you learn from them. I think that's just awesome that you do that, and something I could get better at. I do listen to them, but I don't think that I'm as a big of a student of my own stuff that you are. So it's an area of improvement that I can get better at.
I'll tell you, it can be cringeworthy at times for me, but nevertheless, I think it's good. And, like you said, you already recognize like where you wanted to make changes in your show, that you felt like it was too structured, and now you're letting it flow, and you regret maybe that you cut off conversation. I've done the same thing, Jason. I'm guilty of it too. It's just part of the journey. I mean, you don't wake up in public speaking and interviewing, and you just sort of came to this a little bit, suddenly, as did I. And, I say on repeat, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a bit of a gift, right? You just like a
That's
bull
right.
in a china shop. We just go in, we figure it out, we do it, and we come out with something that's pretty darn good. I mean, like your intro looked super wild, sexy with your cool music and your video. Like you get it done. It's all
Yeah.
good.
So I got to ask you this. So when you've had a year and a half now, right? Ish of guests. Is there a couple of the guests that stick out in your mind that you say, wow, this was a great interview, and why?
Oh gosh, that's like asking you to rate your kids, like which is your favorite, right?
Yeah.
So I had a lot of I learned so much from different people. They made me aware of things I wasn't aware of. And there was one person, Lindsay Kaplan. She's the co-founder and CEO of Chief, and really diving into the disparities between male and female in business and in high level positions, and making it to the C-suite, and the gender parities in pay equity. She really made that really obvious to me in numbers. And I loved her enthusiasm about time travel, that she didn't want to wait 250 years. She wanted to change that. So I think what it did is it made me stick to my guns on certain things. Like when I started the podcast, I wrote a manifesto, and it was that 50% or more of the voices would be female, and that there would be diversity. And this is before, everybody started hanging those flags of DEI, which I'm so glad they did. But it was before that. I knew for myself, I knew intuitively that if people don't hear and see themselves in the leaders speaking on my show, they wouldn't see themselves in those roles. So it was really imperative to me. And if you look at my roster of guests, there's tons of diversity and plenty of women that I made sure to highlight, because you need to see yourself in leaders.
That's right.
So so I think I've learned a lot along the way. There were some people that made me stop and take pause on how I was living my life too. I've learned lessons from people. John Fitch and Max Frenzel wrote the book Time Off, and they came on the show, and I feel like I'm a perpetual student in the title of Time Off, trying to figure out how to nurture that mentality and encourage a good rest ethic. Darren Murph is killing it in the remote world. Their company GitLab was remote before it was sexy, right? Or we had to be. They made it look really cool, but they have all the tools, and they've been so generous in business in sharing all of that. So I've learned a lot, I should probably say. It's hard for me to pick one. I'm sorry. That was the long story long.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, when I think even, with the 20 or so people I've had on the show, trying to pick one that, I think I took something away from each different one, right? Like every single person there was a nugget of aha, or I hadn't thought about that. And I think that's what doing this is all about, right? It's sharing that information. So you started Culture Factor. At what point in doing your podcast did you go, I think I should write a book? Because, that's a huge effort. I mean, you don't just crawl out of bed and write a book, right? Like it's a process. So when and why did you decide to write the book?
Okay. So that's a big question. So I had moved from Connecticut to DC because I think that's a pandemic and election season is always a good time to uproot yourself. And I was living in a hotel in DC for 3 months while we were looking for a place to live. And during all of the moving, I was at a change, things going on with the podcast, different creative ideas about where it should go. And so I thought, I might have this podcast by the time the year is out. So if I want to do this again, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I don't want to go back on YouTube University and Google University and pour through all of those old documents I did. It might be dated by now. I don't want to watch all those videos again and figure it all out. So I went back to all of my notes. I keep copious notes, I will admit. And I wrote myself a manual. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to start another podcast, and I knew I would anyway, even if it wasn't because I was parting ways with Culture Factor, but because I'm just curious about a lot of things. So I knew I would probably start one anyway. That was in my own vision. So I basically wrote myself a manual. And when I finished, I was like, this is actually a book. Like, this is something that other people could get value from, and I can't keep it just for me. And so I went about self-publishing it. And, I think what was interesting about my book and maybe what kind of sets it apart is I had no audio training. I mean, I'm technically proficient. I'm really comfortable using tools, and I've used a lot of different things, but I'd never done a podcast before, ever. I had none of the tools, none of the experience. So everything I did was literally from zero. And so I think in writing the book, I was able to create it so that anybody else that was doing this for the first time was really exactly where I was when I did it. And there weren't really any parts that were intuitive because I learned from scratch. I did send it out to a few people in my podcasting community just to see if they could poke some holes in it. And I got some great advice along the way, and they were duly credited in the book. But I think that it's just written from that place where I don't know what to do and I'd like a podcast. And that's really what it is. So I have an idea and I'd like it on iTunes. And here's my book. So that's why I created it. I wanted to create more podcasts, and I wanted the short version.
Wow.
That's why.
It's funny hearing you tell that story conjures up memories for me. So one of the things that I really love to do in my life is to play golf. And I taught myself kind of how to play golf. I mean, I went with my dad or whatever, but I truly learned to hit golf balls by literally standing on a practice tee and just pounding balls for hours when I was a kid, like to the point I would get blisters. And I had these little wiffle balls I would hit in the backyard. And it was, what if I turn it this way? What if I turn it that way? What if I do that? Like literally every which way you could do. And in my mind, that when you started describing this, I'm envisioning you as you do this, like, I'm going to try this a little different. I'm going to try that a little different. Oh, that's perfect. When I do that, that's perfect. And then you just kind of built that. And so, wow, like it's kind of the same thing, but taking all of that knowledge you learned, I call it the hard way, right? Like the trial and error, and saying, hey, you don't have to go through that. Here you go. This is the how to get it done and do it the right way from the get-go. Which is awesome.
Yeah. And, Clubhouse is such an extension of that for me, because I'm able to have my club and I'm able to talk to people and share with them, very easily and quickly stuff that took me a long time to find on the internet and really read through or listen to multiples of. Someone can just come into a room and ask you a very direct question because that's the point that they're at in the process. And boom, we're just able to answer it for them and they're off to the races, which makes me really happy. They don't have to go buy the book. They could come visit me. But if they want something that is more concise, then they have it. But I do love that. And I love how you learned with the golf, like I think that's part of it is, again, it comes back to that you don't know what you don't know. So you might have actually learned new ways to get from point A to point B you've done before. That's why I said, I think this book is unique because I didn't have that experience in audio. So I wasn't skipping over any parts. It wasn't like intuitive where everything got plugged in and what kind of equipment to use and all of that. I kind of figured it out, just like you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing of it is that, I know for a fact you've talked about equipment and you've referred a few people to some experts that are really good in audio and those type of things. But I love the fact, like I said, the thing I love most about Holly Shannon is her ability to give back to other people and so willingly. I just think it speaks so highly of who you are as a person and what you're accomplished. So you talked about a new podcast or a different venture. Have you started the new podcast?
I actually have. It's been in the midst of helping others with theirs. So I always felt with the book and with Clubhouse that there was ways to help people because we learn from each other. Like when people come and they talk to me, whether they hire me to go through their strategy for their business and how they're going to do it, or they go into Clubhouse and they ask a question, when I'm sharing with them and the exercises I'm walking through and the questions I'm asking them help other people. I mean, if you sit and listen in the audience, you're usually going to take away something from that you can apply to your journey and maybe your idea of having a podcast. Or maybe it's just part of the thought process for you for branding, marketing, thought leadership, whatever. Maybe it's a piece of it. I'm going to say podcasting is not for everybody, so I share that with people. Some people will come into the room and they'll be like, I just don't know. I have all of these other things going on. I'm not sure if it's where I want to put my energy. That's okay too. I think that's part of being able to have a strategic conversation about what really works and what doesn't. So I have been recording the content. I do have that in the title at Clubhouse, so it's not a mystery to people if they come in the room. And if they're open to letting me share their story and their questions, which I always ask, I invite them up to the stage and we workshop together. So I have been putting some content together. I've been really excited at some of the conversations, but I have been so honored to share the stage with some legends in the podcasting industry. So it's not just always my vantage point. And everybody brings other things to the table. So it's really beautiful to be able to workshop with somebody and have more than, one voice speaking to them. So I've been putting that content together and I'm hopeful this summer that I will launch Zero to Podcast, the podcast. And we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, I'm just finishing up my season with Culture Factor. And I'm going to take a little hiatus over the summer. It's taken a lot of energy out of me. And I think it's time for a little break. And hopefully people won't mind me taking a little break and working on some other projects. And I've been very fortunate to help some people with their podcasts. So actually you will find one of them interesting. It's called Birdie Bound, and it's an LPGA golfer and professor. And she is going to be launching her podcast, Nicole DeMargin. So you'll have to
I'm gonna make
I will
note of that.
I will send that to you, so no worries. But it's Birdie Bound, Birdie Bound, and she's amazing. So yeah, so I'm just working with a few people. I have a couple clients that I'm wrapping up some strategy work with them, and we'll see what happens. See what the
That's
summer
awesome.
brings.
So, as we're kind of getting towards the end of our time, I kind of like to ask the guests, everyone in their own way is doing, or they, in order for them to be invited on the show, I always find people I think that are living their purpose. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you on the show, was because I'm like, she found podcasting and this is clearly what her purpose. Like, I truly believe this, that you were put on this earth to have a point of view and to do it through this medium. And I get excited when people are doing that, because the smile on your face says it all. Like, you have that passion for it and it brings you joy. It really does. It brings you joy. It makes your soul happy. It makes you happy to talk about it. And that's why I was so intrigued with you. So I guess what I'm asking is, for somebody that's out there, because there are a lot of people that are out there that are just, they're in a job, or they're doing things and they're making it, but they just haven't found that it thing. Can you offer a little bit of encouragement to someone who's maybe in that funk, that needs that encouragement to search and find their purpose?
Absolutely. By the way, you kind of got me a little teary-eyed when you were saying that. It's very sweet of you, Jason. Thank you. I will tell you that, I have lived careers more like a roller coaster. It's never been linear for me. And I think that we are brought up into society, even as little kids. What do you want to be when you grow up? And it's so hard. Like, okay, pick one thing at, age 5, at age 10, at age 15, you're graduating college. What's that one thing? Okay, well, you're graduating. What's the one thing? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that's really hard. I think what I would say to people to find your passion is to explore many things. And I've even said this to my son, you don't have to be one thing, you can be many things. And so you can be a guitarist and a podcaster and in finance, and you can be an influencer on the best coffee in your city. And, you can be so many different things. And I think the more things you tap into about yourself, like just any little thing that interests you, eventually you're going to land on something that you feel that bubble of passion for, that just feels really good. As I said in the beginning, I did a lot of marketing work. I did hospitality and sales and large trade shows and meetings, receptions, and I had a lot of fun when I was doing all of that stuff. I traveled all around the country. It was great. But I also indulged in my creative side. I actually had a jewelry business for 15 years during that time. And there was a lot of overlap, and I really learned new things. I learned, lost wax casting, 3D printing, soldering, hammering, bezel setting. I learned all of these different things because I had a passion for working with my hands, hammering metal, melting things. Like I was a bit of a pyro or something, but like I really loved all that, and I had passion for it. And then it waned a little bit. Like I kind of lost the love for it a little bit. And I started getting back into marketing, and then found that I really loved writing. And I started to get passionate about that. And then I fell into podcasting. So clearly I've like I say in my bio, like I'm a Swiss Army knife. Like I've got a variety of things that I can do now. But I never do one thing. I never do. I do multiple things. And that's how I would recommend people to find their passion. Don't put pressure on yourself to pick one thing and go hard at it. Like pick a few things that interest you. and enjoy the process of each one. And one will bubble to the surface a little more.
Wow, great advice. I mean, that's the variety and being open to where it takes you. I think is just fantastic advice. Holly, for those of those watching and that will watch this in kind of in perpetuity, if they want to get a hold of you for some advice or some more one-on-one discussions about starting a podcast, what are the best ways to reach you?
I'd say hollyshannon.com is going to be the best. And we can set up a time and get you up and running with your podcast, whether it's for your business or yourself.
All right, Holly, thank you again for being here. Thank you, audience, for watching today. We'll be back here again next Wednesday at 3 p.m., same time, talking about living a purposeful lifestyle. Until then, live with purpose and passion and make it a great week. We're out. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks.